and welcome to another evening of frank conversation here on Hard Copy, coming to you from our studios in Abuja. I'm Maokpe Ogun Yusuf. Over a fortnight ago on this program, we started a conversation on democracy and Nigeria's journey so far. Your response to the issues raised here have been amazing, and would like to acknowledge and thank you for your feedback. This week, we focus on the role of the media in Nigeria's democracy. This has become even more important because only this week, the Media Foundation for Africa, in partnership with the Nigerian Union of Journalists, released a press freedom report detailing the killing of about 8 journalists and over 300 infractions involving about 500 others over a period of 5 years. Similarly, the Resource Center for Human Rights and Civic Education held a State of the Nation press conference expressing its fears over new amendments proposed for the Nigerian Press Council Act and the Nigerian Broadcasting Code. The Constitution of Nigeria, in Section 22, says the press, radio, television, and other agencies of mass media shall at all times be free to uphold the fundamental objectives contained in this chapter and uphold the responsibility and accountability of the government to the people. How free has the media been in carrying out its duties as enshrined in Section 22 of the Constitution? And how has the press upheld its duty of holding government accountable to the people? Tonight, I speak with a seasoned journalist, Mr. Aiyetan, who is an investigative journalist, media trainer, and newsroom mentor. He's also the founder and executive director of the International Center for Investigative Reporting, ICIR, in Abuja, and was a senior associate editor and Abuja bureau chief at NAT'L magazine. Mr. Aiyetan, welcome to Hard Copy.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
I'd like to ask your experience moving from autocracy, as we once had military rule, to democracy. Would you say it has made your job as a journalist a lot easier to practice?
Thank you for having me. Well, moving from military rule to civilian rule, and how many years of, more than 20 years of civilian rule now? So in the past, I would say yes. Journalists had a free, relatively, free rein to do their work. We could do critical reporting of government, whether the media or opposition party under Yaradua, under Obasanjo, under Goodluck Jonathan, we could, to a large extent, do our work without fear of repression, of being hounded. I wouldn't say it will be 100%, but in the last 6 years, increasingly, it's become more difficult to be a journalist in Nigeria. And I'll give the example of my organization, where we do a lot of investigative reports. And we say that our role complements government's anti-corruption campaign. So officials of government have stolen money, we expose this, and what happens? Officials of government are using state institutions like the police, like the SSS and others, to hound us for doing our work. You started by saying that Section 22 of the Constitution gives the mandate to the media to hold government, its institutions and officials to account. And that's exactly what we do when we do investigative reports. But so we send out freedom of information requests, which makes it easy for us to receive data, information, and all that should be available anyway in the public space, according to the FOIA Act. Just by doing that, we have committed an offense in the eyes of the DSS, because the DSS visits our office the first time, the second time, and we try to find out what's the problem. And they say that agencies of government that received freedom of information requests from us wrote to them that, this is a fake organization or whatever. So what's the job of the DSS? Gathering intelligence. You can't go online and find out, do these agents, does this organization exist? And so they come to our office.
And that has happened more
It happened in
in
the
the last
last
6 years.
2 years now. Another one is we do an investigative report, we publish. What does the law say about libel and such infractions? For whatever, whoever, you go to court. Playing the role of a journalist, being a journalist, doing critical reporting, even reporting anything, is becoming increasingly a difficult thing to be in Nigeria.
You know, it's very interesting you use the word increasingly, and I do not know if you caught the interview I had with Mr. Festus Keyamo, Minister of State for Labour, last week or 2 weeks ago, where I put this question. We're having a conversation on Twitter ban, which we will come to. He insists it's a suspension of Twitter, not a ban. And I used the word increasingly, and he had a very vigorous response to my question, and I'd like you to just take a listen to it. So how would you respond to those who think that increasingly free speech, because even before now, free speech, a lot of people felt that they couldn't speak freely, especially in criticism of government.
Why? Who said so? Who has been arrested for speaking? It's all, look, listen, this all complete barbadas, complete rubbish and nonsense.
It cannot be rubbish.
Under the regime we're coming from, they said, oh, it is better in the past. You remember at the point they came to seize newspapers on the streets? Seize newspapers on the streets. Has Buhari ever done that?
I do not know.
Has Buhari ever done that?
I do not know if this is a comparison between...
It is, because people are saying that we are increasingly...
Well, the conversation did go on, and I had to, bring up instances of the press council bill and, what have you. However, now that you've listened to that about how, people are still free to speak anyway, what are your thoughts on that?
You see, listening to Keyamo, I feel so disappointed. And that's the attitude of people in this government, because he says it's balderdash. And for a government official, you see, that attitude just shows you that they don't understand the dynamics of democracy, that you go into government to serve. So I will not bandy words with him. I will speak from my own experience. I worked in Concord newspapers. I worked in Tel magazine under the military. Of course, yes, we're not saying that there was no repression of the press in Nigeria. From the experience of Dayo Aiyetan, who works in the ICIR, the DSS had never come to our office. We've been in existence for 10 years. But in the last 3 years, the DSS has been to our office twice. We've been stalked twice. The DSS, out of the blues, is inviting our journalists because we did a story. Officials of government who do not like the investigative reports we do are using the office of the Attorney General, are using the police, are using the DSS, and they invite us, and we get there and we ask questions. Why are we here? And then there's an official of, so tell him to go to court. Let me tell you, the truth of the matter is, whether people in government or in the presidency believe it or not, increasingly, journalists are facing attacks and situations that make our work more difficult. Is it not under the Buhari government that the military went and stormed Premium Times, arrested the publisher, Dakwalon Yomi, and Evelyn Okaku? The NUJ report says at least 7 journalists have been killed. There have been at least 300 incidents of attacks or violence or infractions against the media. Apart from the Premium Times example I gave, apart from mine, a channel's intern was killed. Why? So I'm saying that for just covering a protest, anything can happen. And it is a culture that is evolving increasingly.
I know that, more and more, the reason why it would seem that voices have been louder. Yes, we had Press Freedom Day, and that was celebrated robustly, if you like, and these issues came to light. But then again, this conversation on press freedom has also come again to light with the NUJ's report, and also that of the Resource Center for Human Rights and Civic Education, which spoke about the Nigeria Press Council Act and the Nigerian Broadcasting Code, because these amendments now have, some of the amendments being proposed have been considered obnoxious by the people who are going to use some of them. But I'm wondering, do you think that the cry, because sometimes these things are also synonymous of cries of the opposition, oh, the opposition has infiltrated the media, and maybe that's why it's difficult for sometimes government to listen. What are your thoughts on that?
So, why is the government, and I say the government, not the minister or any member of, why is the government interested in amending the NBC Act? Why is the government interested at this time in amending the Nigerian Press Council Act? So, reading from here, let me say this, section 2B, it says, ensure that regulatory control is applied across the range of broadcasting services according to the degree of influence that different types of broadcasting services are able to exert in shaping community views in Nigeria. So government is interested in controlling anything public opinion. Why should the government be interested in controlling what Nigerians think? Do we understand the basis of democracy? The freedom, what freedom of speech means? Let me tell you, in terms of all the props of democracy, separation of powers, the independence of the media, rule of law, freedom of speech, this government has failed woefully regarding any of them. The legislature is in the pocket of the executive. We see what they have done with the judiciary. Look at what they are doing with the media. Look at what they are doing with expression of people's opinion. Now, the other thing is, it is such, I can't believe that the Minister of Information will take a position where you say it's such desperation, it's so shameful. So if you read the amendment bill properly, you will see where they say part of this control includes online news. It means any organization, including channels, including any news organization that has a news website. What concerns NBC with my news website? Do I broadcast? So in the desperation to control public opinion, and that's exactly what is happening with Twitter. Because the space occupied by Twitter, the social media space, is a leveler. That is where, because you can't engage your representatives in the physical. You can't even come near their SUVs. You can't wave at them. You can't ask questions in public. So on Twitter, that is the space where you can look your representative in the face and say, what you're doing is rubbish. You can call them out and so on. And that is the space they want to control so that people will not be able to express themselves freely.
Welcome back. You're watching Hard Copy, coming to you from our studios in Abuja. Mr. Aiyetan is an investigative journalist, media trainer, and newsroom mentor, and is our guest tonight. And we've been taking a look at how free the media has been in carrying out its duties as enshrined in Section 22 of the Constitution. Now, national security has been the reason given for the suspension of Twitter, and we've been told that in any case there are other social media platforms. What's the hue and cry about?
So, first, there was no national security consideration a month ago, 2 months before the Twitter ban, 6 months before, a year before. It took Twitter to deal with the president for the issue of national security, because we spoke to some government officials, some of our sources in security, and that's the narrative they're coming up with, that, you know, some Nigerians are using Twitter and social media. They didn't say Twitter, they said social media, to propagate all kinds of hate speech and all kinds of things. So there is no Facebook. They're not using Facebook for the same thing. Facebook doesn't pose the same threat. Instagram doesn't pose the same threat. I can talk about other means of communication that people can use, you know, to do whatever about national security. So I don't think that kind of explanation holds water.
Reading a report that was released by the Nigerian Union of Journalists, I mean, a part of it caught my attention. One of the quotes they started with was that of Joe Simon, who is the executive director of Community to Protect Journalists. And he says, in many parts of Africa where democracy has supposedly taken root after years of strife, press conditions have actually worsened. He said powerful figures have developed a wide range of innovative approaches that culminatively represent a soft authoritarianism that is spreading in many regions of the world. Journalists in many repressive societies suffer, if you will, from too much government, smothering, self-serving and intrusive governments that seek to sharply restrict the boundaries of dissent. Now, the word that caught my attention was a soft authoritarianism. And he says it is spreading in many regions of the world. So it would seem that the threat that journalists face in Nigeria is not isolated. What are your thoughts on this soft authoritarianism, and how do you think journalists can continue to be journalists? Because there are those who differentiate journalists from activists. Or do you think that journalists will need to become activists to survive soft authoritarianism?
Well, that's what we've been talking about, that increasingly government officials, and it's true, it's not only in Nigeria, and sometimes it depends on the authoritarian leadership in countries. It happened in the US with former President Trump. And so in Africa, where, you know, you have big men in power, authoritarian big men who are democratic presidents, you find that the first thing they want to do is any kind of dissent or opposition, they shut them up. And the media is usually one of the victims. That is what has happened in Nigeria. With the issue of the press, the media becoming activists, I think that even though it is how do I put it? It's attractive for us to want to play that role of activists.
In the evolution of your work, how would you describe journalism in Nigeria today, and where do you look forward to it being? Or should I say, how would you describe democracy today in Nigeria? Is it what we thought it was going to be when, you know, those who fought for it fought for democracy?
Certainly not. You know,
how far off the mark are we?
I think in the last 6 years we have derailed. The gains of the first decade and a half under Obasanjo, under successive governments, that laid foundations. Look, let me tell you, we all know that Rome was not built in a day. We started this journey of civilian rule in 1999. Maybe give us 20, 50 years. The US, the UK, European countries, Germany, all of them build their democracy over time. And we have been doing this. But the last 6 years, as a matter of fact, this government and what they have done and what they are doing has become a threat to our democracy. Building, because We are now seeing the state attacking all the props of democracy. Yes. And so what we have gained in building our democracy over the last, 15, 16, 20 years, we are just destroying them.
I also want us to focus on the state governments, because when you look at the list of infractions
Absolutely.
as listed by the NUJ, it is not just the federal government. The state governments also carry a huge can as well. How do you think that, I don't know whether it's one influencing the other, or how do we beam a searchlight on what is happening at a subnational level?
That is the fear we have. That a culture is building in our country. And that culture starts with the federal government, now officials of the federal government, now just about any Dick and Harry. You write a poem about the Minister of Information, he can ask you to be arrested just because of that. He can't go through the normal channels of legal. Now, in which state? Is it Ebonyi? Governor Umahi, just because two journalists wrote about the terrible response of the state government to the coronavirus, pandemic. They were hounded, they were, I think, arrested, and then they were barred from covering. In the villa, because somebody, what's his name, Lekan Adetayo of the Punch, wrote something about the government. It's not Femi Adesina or anybody. The security detail of the president called him, lambasted him, and they took and they paraded him before security men and told, don't allow this guy. It's a culture that is building. So increasingly now, in Akwa Ibom, in Ebonyi, state governments have the power to act with impunity and arrest journalists. So it is this culture that we're afraid of, that it has to stop. I think that we should show our angst by marching to the National Assembly, where they are deciding our future. Nigerian Union of Journalists should organize a march to the National Assembly. The Guild of Editors should stop going on tours of projects. They should step up. This is an existential threat. We should all come together and face this government and say no to these obnoxious laws.
I'm just wondering what part we have also played in enabling this. Because you just referred to the economics of it. You referred to going on tours and things of the sort. Have we been able to face ourselves as well, to give ourselves some home truths?
Oh, absolutely. When we hobnob and, with government officials, how do we earn any respect? Because for years I have talked about the need for Nigerian media to have a national talk shop of sorts. Nigerian journalism is dying. Is dying. Credit to organizations like the channels and so on that are still keeping the flame, burning. But in many newsrooms, the corruption that has eaten into the fabrics of the Nigerian media is unbelievable, is unimaginable. We need to deal with that. We all need to come together, have a national conversation. Part of the problem is journalism in Nigeria today, as in other parts of the world, is not profitable, but it doesn't come on a platter of gold. We need to design, ways and means by which, in other places, the digital platform is viable for them. Why can't it be viable for us? We're not talking about it.
If we don't heed some of the things, the advice which you're given right now, how dangerous a threat is that to our democracy?
It's a huge... So what it means is that anybody will come into government and do whatever they like, and each individual media household, as long as, they can get their benefits from this government. But what will happen? Eventually, They will ride roughshod over the media, and you will find a situation where there will be no media, no credible media. And without the media in any democracy, it's a sham democracy. The immediate pressing existential threat that faces us are these obnoxious bills. Lai Mohammed, the minister, will be out of office in 2 years, maybe forever. What legacy is he going to leave behind? Is it this legacy of fear and control of the media? We shouldn't allow that to happen.
It's a fine place to leave it, and a sobering place as well. Mr. Aiyetan, thank you for coming on Hard Copy.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, that's where we leave the conversation tonight. As always, we want to hear from you, and hopefully we'll be able to respond to some of your mails. Thank you for watching. I'm Maokwe Yusuf. Good night.